All right, welcome back. Joining me right now is my guest. He is Ludovic Subran, the Chief Economist at Allianz. Hello, Ludovic, and thank you for joining me on today's edition of the show. Sorry that, the connection, we couldn't get you on time. But welcome to the program. Good to speak with you today. Ludo, Ludovic, I can't hear you. Can you unmute so that I can hear you?
You can hear me now.
Yes, I can hear you now. I can hear
Two
you now.
years was in the pandemic and we're still muting ourselves. That sounds bad.
Yeah, I
Very happy to
understand
be
that.
with you today, Nancy.
Thank you very much. Now let's get started. Your report, I've gone through your report. It was very incisive. But I must start by asking you, this is the 12th edition. Talk to me about how you arrived at this report. I know this is the 12th edition that you've published. You looked at 23 industry sectors, about 94 countries. Just speak to me in like 30 seconds why this report is necessary and why business leaders should take note of this report which you've published.
After a pandemic and a war, I think there is no need to see why it was important for us to understand what were the risks that business leaders had on their mind in the countries we operate as Allianz. We've been doing that for quite some time, but I think now more than ever, we need to understand how to build resilience, how to lower vulnerabilities, and how to best accompany our commercial customers when it comes to reducing those risks or mitigating those risks together.
Okay. Now, speak to me about what concerns are really keeping businesses or business leaders awake at night, that they are not sleeping and they're sleeping perhaps with one eye open. What are the top global business risks? Global.
So global, first is cyber incidents. You just laughed with your precedent guest about, checking a website and being phished is one of the biggest concerns. We know so many companies go bust because of cyber incidents. Second is business interruption and supply chain disruptions in general. I think that's also related to the reopening after COVID that has caused a lot of shortages. And the energy crisis has caused a lot of shortages. And the third is macroeconomic developments. I think people see, the recession fears looming ahead, central banks really going after killing inflation, whatever it takes. So businesses are worried that they operate in an environment with more costly inputs, higher wage bill, and higher refinancing costs. So these are the three risks globally. They're a bit different in Nigeria, though. I'm happy to talk about that.
Yes, I'll come to Nigeria in a bit, but I also want to talk about, I saw a new entrant, which is energy crisis, supply shortage, outage, price fluctuation. Would it be as a result of inflation, global inflation, which we've seen, and you're seeing that energy crisis just crept into this your report, this 12th edition?
In Nigeria, energy crisis is not an issue, maybe because you guys have a lot of oil. But in my country, where I come from in Europe, now everybody starts looking at where we get the light from or where we get the electricity from. So I think the war with Russia has, made a lot of businesses realize that they need to think differently about the energy infrastructure, their reliance on the public energy infrastructure, and what do they do to have a better energy efficiency. So energy is there. You mentioned shortages in general. I think the fact that we closed the world after COVID and reopened very fast has proven that maybe this just-in-time stock management is not a solution anymore, that we need to think about strategic stockpiling. Same thing with energy, diversifying the sources, looking at where the energy is coming from and how we can make sure we are resilient to a shock. Russian gas imports represented 2 years ago almost 60% of the energy mix in Germany, right? So that's why these risks are coming back in. And I hope they're making some of the people in the companies busy trying to find solutions because they are not going away, unfortunately.
Okay, let's talk about the important business risks in Africa. And top on the list really is macroeconomic development. Macroeconomic in developments like inflation and what have you, deflation in, but I'm not sure we even have the case of deflation in Africa. Could you speak to us about some of the top business risks in Africa?
Yeah, for the African continent, macro tops the list. It's the same in Nigeria, followed by political risk, and third is cyber. I think it reflects a bit this idea that the African continent is a bit in a difficult situation now with the very high cost of financing and high dollar. You've seen default in Zambia, you've seen Ghana being in the newspaper recently. So I think the businesses in the continent are a bit concerned that there is a risk of default, sovereign default, that they are concerned about currency risks, and they are concerned about indeed inflation creating higher social unrest risk. That's really something that is very top of mind of the businesses in the continent.
Ludovic, is really surprising to me that macroeconomic risk are topping business risk in Nigeria, not even political risk, bearing in mind that Nigerians will be going to the polls in just a few days. What I can see right here on the board, that's the graphics, I'm taking a look at it. Political risk second, cyber incidents, then theft, fraud, number 5, and what have you. Why, really? One would really say that people will be a bit skeptical about this election and how it will affect businesses. But business leaders in Nigeria are thinking otherwise.
Well, I think people in Nigeria are very resilient to the politicians. So the businesses are used to, a bit of trouble on that line. And so the elections are very near. So, of course, people are concerned. But I think businesses are even more concerned about, the risk it causes to the currency, to the default, to the way international investors are looking into Nigeria. So it's interesting to see that businesses, no matter who wins the election, they are more worried about the management of economic policies after these elections as potentially affecting negatively their business. And so I think this is a big wake-up call, and this is the message from the business community also, to make sure that whoever wins this election, they have to put the economy first, the economy that works for the Nigerian middle class, but that also works for the Nigerian companies.
One interesting thing that I saw concerning Nigeria there, the top risk is number 6, shortage of skilled workforce. And I didn't see it in Morocco, I didn't see it in Namibia, I didn't see it in which other country? Some other African countries, and this is new for Nigeria, shortage of skilled workforce in Nigeria. We're seeing a migration of even the skilled workers leave Nigeria. So how concerned should employers like us be around getting good or even great staff to do the job?
This is a big question. I think for the longest time there was this brain drain from the African continent to Europe and to the US and to the UK, and now because the business sector in the continent is growing so fast and is really competing in terms of human capital with what you can see in the north, they are at a double risk of shortage. The first one is universities and training and active labor market policies not really working well to really get the right people to the right jobs. And then the second is there is still a bit of a brain drain. And so the idea is, how do you motivate the diaspora to come back? How do you make sure you are competitive on salaries for these, white collar jobs with high value added, high needs for, in the insurance sector, actuaries, legal experts, digital marketing experts. You see, a lot of these jobs, they require the very top degrees, and most of these people, they need to be motivated to stay in the country or come back, and this is a big cost for companies.
Okay, which industry sectors are more at risk of all those that we're talking about? Can we just take a look at Africa or even Nigeria? Nigeria, of course, is an agrarian society, though our GDP tells us now that 52% of our GDP is about the services sector. Which industry sectors, which most important business risk by industry sector? We should look at it this year, 2023.
So in the report, we do the analysis by industry. So for example, for agriculture, I can give you the list is a bit different than the general, right? So we have for food sector, business interruption is very important. For financial services, it's more cyber incidents. For engineering and construction, it's natural catastrophe that comes in number 2. So it's really different. From agriculture, it's climate change. So it's true that each industry has done their vulnerability mapping and sees the one that can really disrupt their growth. You find all of this, detail in the report. What I'm surprised is when you break down by industry, the economic, when you break down by industry, the economic aspect doesn't come up as strong. It's more the business related sectors that come in as most important.
Mm. Quite interesting there. I liked your analysis on entertainment, because that also caught my view. Here, we know that Nigeria's entertainment sector is also coming up. Our agriculture sector, we also have that of consumer goods. Can you speak to me about some of the risks that we should really take note of? Or I see, like in entertainment, for example, perhaps also globally, the pandemic outbreak. There's also this, apprehension over in China. And now we're seeing like COVID, will COVID resurface again and all of that? Are business leaders not sleeping over this issue?
I hope the Nollywood industry has zero risk, because I like my the Nigerian, TV shows and series. But the number one is cyber incidents. I think this risk again of fraud and malware is very big in the entertainment industry. And then you have market competitions that comes in, and then the pandemic outbreak. So the risk indeed of having to close, the filming and the designing. So it's interesting that I think the industry has known how to cope with the closing and reopening, but now the topic of tech and fraud is coming big because of all the digital content and the online creator community that has exploded in Nigeria, and then the market development. So the fact that there is a lot more competition from the global entertainment industry as the world has reopened and is looking for good content.
Okay, I think, Ludovic, we may do this again. Because deep in my heart, I'm not yet satisfied with the way we've looked at this report. But at least, given the few minutes we've utilized, about 15 or so minutes, you've been able to summarize the business script. But I'm hoping that we'll speak again soon to dissect each report, perhaps continentally. So thank you very much for joining us today, and have a lovely day.
Thank you, Nancy.
All right, I've been speaking with Ludovic Subran, who is the chief economist at Allianz SA. That's the show today. Thank you all for being a part of it. Tomorrow, join us again, same time, same station. I am Nancy Naji. Be the best you can be, and be the change that you want to see. Bye now.